Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see so many people here. Whoa, one second. Also in person and also online. Just before I start, I want to introduce myself. My name is Tammy Salomon. I've been at Wix for 6.5 years. I started in customer care and moved across to UX writing a few years afterwards. And I joined the accessibility team in September 2020. So today we're going to talk about how to change a company culture and how to raise awareness of accessibility in large companies. So how did accessibility start at Wix and in Israel in general? In 1998, Israel passed the Equal Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Similar to the ADA in the US, it prohibits any type of discrimination against people with disabilities in public spaces, public services, employment, etc. The act included a mention of website accessibility, but because it didn't provide any type of specifications, nothing was really done about it and it was largely ignored. So fast forward many, many years to October 2016, and the Israeli standard for website accessibility law was passed in the Knesset. So based on WCAG, which is the International Guidelines for Website Accessibility, the law was set to be enforced a year from then, in October 2017. So web accessibility standards, not necessarily web accessibility as a law, the standards came in, finally became law. What did this mean for us? Wix, as a platform for building websites, meant that anybody who actually created a website on Wix had the potential to be sued if that website wasn't accessible. And we had 1 year to make sure that our users wouldn't get sued. Until then, Wix hadn't really done anything about accessibility. Not because we didn't want to, it was always there, but there were always other projects that took precedence. But with this law coming into being, what became critical for our users became critical for us, so accessibility was put on the table. So a temporary team was put together. Nir, who just spoke to us, who was a product manager in a different place in the company, was brought in as product. Neil, who's sitting at the back of the room, was brought in as an external advisor. And people were brought in from different places within the company, and they came and went. The thought behind this was that this was a project that was temporary. And once it was done, that's it. Everyone would go back to what they were doing before. So the goal of this project was basically to give our users the information and the tools that they needed to make sure that their websites were accessible. So the team took a straightforward approach. Let's take the law, let's break it down and understand what we need. Let's see where we fit in, where we stand in terms of all these different criteria, and then we'll fill in the gaps. Sounds pretty easy and pretty straightforward. Reality? So October 2017 came across and the Israeli standard went into effect. And we were not even close to ready. That straightforward approach, not really so straightforward, for a few reasons. So first of all, in terms of priorities, accessibility laws aren't prioritized. There's not one thing that you need more than another one. So if a user doesn't have alt text on an image, it's just as critical as if keyboard functionality doesn't work. And we didn't know what to approach first. Not just that, we were following the Israeli standard, but we're an international company with international users, and every country, region, locale has different laws. And if we were only going to focus on one law, or even just focus on trying to understand the laws in every single place, it could take months or even years just to understand what was going on. So we realized that we couldn't just use the Israeli law as a base. We needed to actually follow WCAG, the international standards, and make sure that we were WCAG compliant so we could serve all our users. And the third thing that we realized was that compliance wasn't really the goal, because you could follow the letter of the law, but that doesn't mean that your user experience is going to be the best experience possible. So let's take a clothes store, for example. So if the law says that I need to add a ramp with a rail, in order to allow people in wheelchairs or people who can't use stairs to enter the store. If I can build a ramp, and it can be a rickety ramp with a tiny thin rail, and people can theoretically use it to get into the store, but the experience of getting up into the store is not a great one. So I might be compliant, but I'm not doing good service to the people who need that functionality. And then let's take it a step further. Once the user or the wheelchair user, whoever it is, gets into the store, I want them to be able to go in, browse around, try things on, purchase something. I want every person who goes into the store to have the exact same experience. And following that letter of the law isn't necessarily going to do that. So compliance isn't the goal. The goal is a great experience for all our users, because that helps not only our site visitors, but also our users' businesses. We also realized that accessibility wasn't something we could just check off and mark as done, because accessibility laws and regulations are changing all the time. And not just that, new assistive technologies are being developed, browsers are being updated, technologies are being updated, and our products need to be able to be compatible with all of that. And at Wix, we don't only have one product. We're continually developing new products, updating current products, adding new flows. Everything that we produce and release has to be accessible. So what do we do about it? We realized that accessibility had to actually become part of the company culture. And instead of looking at it as solving bugs and solving issues that we've discovered too late, we need to actually make accessibility part of the process from the beginning. So in 2018, the accessibility team was formed. And as of today, we're 7 full-time members, 5 in Tel Aviv, most of whom are here today, 2 in the Ukraine. We have an incredible PMM, product marketing manager, sitting in the back, who helps us promote accessibility within the company and without. And we get assistance from other parts of the company when we need it, analysts, design, etc. So we tackle a lot of things as the accessibility team. The first thing that we started with, which is what the temporary team started, was user sites. So the law, and this is a very broad generalization of a law in one sentence, says that public entities and private organizations that provide public services must be accessible. Our users are creating millions of sites, and we have no idea what type of sites, but we know that at least some of them are creating sites that follow this definition. But what it means for us, it means that all site visitors should be able to access all Wix sites. So to do that, we followed a double approach. We attack it in 2 ways. We look at the people who are building the sites, and we make sure that everything that we give them to build sites is accessible. Components, templates, presets, and things like that. And on the other side, we make sure that all our site visitors have the functionality they need to be able to access our sites and interact with them in the best possible way. Things like visual indicators for keyboard users so they can see where they are on the page, like we saw with Leonie Watson. Skip to main content, so a user doesn't have to go through that repetitive menu every time they go through and can go straight to the main content and functionality like that. But as we did that, we realized that there was one big flaw in what we were doing, because we could give our users anything that they needed to create the site. So we could provide them with the best presets, with incredible color contrast, with the heading structured properly, everything looking fantastic. But once we gave them to the users, we have absolutely no control over what they do with them. So our users can take the most accessible design and turn it into something that is so inaccessible that nobody can access. They can change the color, they can change the headings, they can add images without alt text. And we have absolutely no control. We cannot go and check every single site before and give them the check and say, okay, you can go out into the world now, you're accessible. So in 2021, we released the Accessibility Wizard, which is actually a tool that users can go in and actually audit their own site content. So the wizard scans the site, provides them with all kinds of things that they can change within the wizard, and then provides them with checklists that they can go through and manually review their site to make sure that, that their content is okay and is accessible. We realized during this time that the reactive approach, which is what we were doing when we were trying to be compliant with the law, wasn't something that was great, because looking for bugs and fixing bugs basically puts an extra layer on top of a product that doesn't make a product properly functional. And we needed to actually change our approach from the reactive approach to a proactive approach, which basically means the accessible by design approach, that accessibility is part of the process from the start. And we're a tiny team. There's 5 of us who are working on this stuff. And much as we'd love to be involved in every aspect throughout the entire company, it just wasn't feasible. So we realized that we actually needed to provide all our colleagues with the knowledge, the tools, and the motivation to be able to design and create accessible products, and to use us as a resource, but not to need us for every single stage. So to do that, we started creating checklists for every stage of the process. We've implemented accessibility reviews for design before the designers send off the files for development. We've started implementing automated accessibility functionality for developers and for QA. And we created the Accessibility Champions program, which is for people who aren't part of our full-time team, but who are passionate about accessibility, who sit in different companies and promote accessibility awareness and implementation within their companies. So besides all of this, at the end of last year, we started on a project that we'd wanted to do for a long time. And we started working on the Wix backend, the business manager. We really, really, really want all Wix users to be able to use Wix in all its functionality, regardless of ability. And this is a first step towards that. This isn't something that we're doing because it's the law, because it's not, but it's something that we really believe that is the right thing to do. And while we're doing this, we started working on Wix internal systems, because just as we want Wix to be available for everybody, we also want all Wix employees to be able to access all parts of Wix without any limitations. So when we started working on the business manager, our team updated our statement, our mission statement, to make it easy for anyone to create an accessible website and to run their business on Wix. We're not there yet, but we're getting there slowly, slowly. So it sounds like we're all done, right? We've got it all covered. We know exactly what we're doing. We can go home and just leave it for like everybody else to do. But no, we don't, and we're not even close. I wish I could say that we were, but we're not. Because we're all learning all the time. Our processes within the company are continuously being refined, but accessibility, the world, is always growing and is always changing. And there's always new things to learn and new things to implement, new products to understand what we're doing with. And we're always going to be learning and we're always going to be improving. And we have a lot of things that stand in our way. One of the main things is that accessibility actually can't be quantified. Most companies nowadays are very, very, very data-driven and make a lot of decisions based on ROI, return on investment. But accessibility is all about the user experience. It's how real people with disabilities are experiencing our product. And we don't know, and we can't know, how many people our work is affecting. So we don't know how to measure our profit margins based on the work we do with accessibility. We know that it has an effect, but it's not a measurable effect. And not just that, all the work we do in implementing accessibility functionality is something that we don't charge for and we will never charge for. So we're never really going to know what the bottom line is for implementing accessibility. Not just that, no company has unlimited resources, unfortunately. So there's always other more critical things to do and other people putting their hands up and demanding the resources that we so desperately need. So unfortunately, a lot of times accessibility is something that only takes precedence when it actually affects our users on the legal side, when users will come in and say, well, we have an issue here and we're going to get sued unless you fix it. So what do we do about this? We take a double approach. I call it the top-down and bottom-up approach. So we speak to management, we speak to the decision makers, and we make our case. And we keep on speaking to management and the decision makers, and we keep on making our case. But at the same time, we actually speak to the people who on the ground are doing the work. The product managers, designers, writers, developers, QA, anybody who's involved in actually implementing the accessibility processes, we speak to them because they're the people who are really going to make that change. So we talk about awareness. We tell them about the different types of disabilities. We make them aware that it's about keyboard users, it's about screen reader users, but it's also about so many other types of users that they might not even think about. And we get people to care because caring and empathy is an important part of the accessibility process, and we see that that's how people get involved. And once we get people on board, we make sure that they have all the tools and all the resources they need to actually get working and to implement accessibility in their products. Because if accessibility is baked into a product from the beginning, layer by layer, you're not only going to get a better product with better design, it's just going to be a lot more professional. So we're seeing a lot of progress. The word accessibility is something that's not a foreign word anymore. When we mention it, people know about it. Instead of chasing people, like we've spent a lot of time doing, we are still chasing, but we see people coming to us. People are interested. People want to know about accessibility, and they want to know what they can do to make sure that more people can access their products. And we're also seeing a global trend. More and more companies are putting accessibility on their agenda, and they're continuing to do so, whether it's because of grassroots, initiatives or movements like inclusivity, accessibility, all types of human rights movements. Companies are realizing, and they're getting there. And we're going to get to a point, I hope, I believe, where accessibility isn't something that we have to fight for. It's just going to become part of the process because there's no reason why it shouldn't be there. So what can you do? Whether you're in a company that's already working with accessibility or whether no one is doing anything, there are a few things that you can do to get started. So first of all, get people to care. Make people aware of the frustration that people have when they can't use the product as you intend them. So take away your mouse, or imagine your mouse is broken, you can't use it. Can you use your product using just a keyboard? If your screen's not working, can you use it with just a screen reader? Have you ever tried to use your product with a screen reader? If you haven't, and you're not implementing accessibility, I can guarantee you, you will be horrified when you realize what people who use screen readers are experiencing when they're using your product. Turn your screen to monochrome and see if you can understand everything that's going on, or whether you're using color in your product in a way that people who are colorblind won't be able to understand and interact. And get people, really, make it personal. Because when 17% of the population have some type of disability, and around 90% of disabilities are invisible, it means that accessibility isn't just about someone in a country far away or in another city. It's about people you work with. It's about family members. It's about the person down the street. It's about the person who's selling you something in the store. And it's about you, whether it's now or as Anir mentioned, in a few years' time. It really is not just an abstract concept. Involve the people around you. A lot of times a misconception about accessibility is that it's just about developers, and it's not. Everybody should be involved and everybody needs to take ownership. And even if you can't get people involved, if you're doing your bit, every little bit helps, especially for the people who are writers here. Your words can make such an impact that any little thing that you do is already going to improve the experience and do so much. Make accessibility visible. A lot of the things that we need to implement accessibility into our products are hidden in the code. So if you're working with Figma or Sketch or whatever program you're using, make sure that anything that needs to be added in terms of accessibility, heading structure, focus order, tab order, screen reader only content, make sure it's there in your files and that people can see it so that everybody in your team is aligned with what needs to be done, and it's there for people to see. And remember, the better your definitions, the better your product's going to be. Take a look at what's going on around. The accessibility world is very open. There's a lot of open source stuff, and everybody is willing to share and to collaborate, because creating a uniform and great experience for people is what the accessibility world is looking for. So keep track, keep an eye out, and if you're looking for any type of solution and you find something out there that works, don't be afraid to use it. And try and involve users with disabilities in your workflows, whether it's at the beginning when you're designing your product or as part of usability testing. People who need the functionality you're adding are the only people who are really going to know if what you're doing works and is implemented properly. So get them involved and speak to people, find people. There are external companies that actually provide the service if your company doesn't do it, but it's very, very important because, like I said before, compliance, we can all read a law and we can all know what we should do to be compliant, but anybody who's not using the functionality, who doesn't need what we're providing, isn't going to be able to tell you if you've done a good job of it. And learn. Accessibility is a field that is continuously changing, continuously being updated, and there's so many discussions going on, specifically with writing. Previously, or once upon a time, a lot of, as I mentioned before also, keyboard users and screen reader users were a huge part of what the law was focusing on. But the discussions nowadays are changing, and other disabilities are coming into focus, whether it's people with vision disabilities like what Nir showed you before, people with cognitive issues, intellectual disabilities, memory loss, PTSD, all kinds of disabilities where our words can make so much of an impact if we learn how to use them properly. And remember that our words are so incredibly powerful. And as part of what we do, we should be writing with inclusivity and accessibility in mind, because that is the aim of what we do, is to get people to use our products and to interact with them in the best way possible. So if you do learn about it and if you do write with these things in mind, you're improving the experience for those 17% of people who need it and for everybody else who's using your product. So here are a few tips, just a few, there are a lot, I'm giving you a few here, on how to write more inclusively. And these are things that you should be doing as UX writers and content designers anyway, as part of your processes. Create easy to use intuitive flows with a clear structure and plenty of white space. Make sure you structure your pages properly with clear headings so users can easily scan your pages and know what comes after those headings. Make sure all important information is always available on screen and not hidden in tooltips or in placeholders, which for a lot of people aren't accessible. Avoid generic CTAs or links. Some of you, when you came in, may have seen our read mores and learn mores. Read mores and learn mores don't help screen reader users who are navigating through links, don't help people who are seeing a big gap between the headings, and they just don't help anyone except for writers who want to save space on a page. Make sure that your users know exactly what's going to happen whenever they select anything. It's so important. Make sure to write short and simple sentences and avoid jargon that a lot of your users aren't going to understand. Also, make sure not to use blocks of text, because for people with cognitive disabilities, it causes a lot of trouble. Use gender-neutral language if you can. And make sure to be self-aware and consider any biases that you may have, whether you realize it or not. And when you're creating your flows, create flows in a way that aim to prevent any type of user errors. But if errors are made, make sure that your error messages are clear and specific and really help the user solve whatever issue they're having without blaming the user. So I want to end off with a quote from Sherry Byrne-Haber. Sherry Byrne-Haber is an accessibility activist. She is a lifelong wheelchair user with low vision, And she got into the accessibility field because she has a daughter who is deaf and she wanted to help make the world better for her daughter, and because of her experiences as a lifelong wheelchair user. So she posted this on LinkedIn last week. I'm not disabled because my legs don't work the same as everyone else, or I have glaucoma. I'm disabled because organizations create barriers when they don't care enough to make sure people like me are included. Let's do our best to break down those barriers and make the web and the world a better place for everybody. Thank you.